Testing 1, 2, 3. I think we're working. Everyone out there who's watching, any Dynamite fans, Darkwing Duck fans especially, thank you so much for joining me and the incredible Tad Stones, Darkwing Duck creator himself. Yay! And this is our follow-up interview. I think it was however many weeks ago we chatted for a little bit for the Kickstarter, for our Dynamite Kickstarter, which is it's now over. Yeah. But if anyone wants to do a late pledge, don't miss out. You can do the late pledge right now. The link is in the bio. But overall, we were able to do over $346,000. So thank you to everyone who participated. And also thank you again, Tad, for not doing just the last interview, but now this one.
No problem. This is the fun part. So, yes, I'm sure all my work with interviews and questions and answers is what really brought in the fans, as opposed to the series we did. And
but I knew I wanted to do a follow-up interview with you because so many people got to tune in for the last one. And like we were stretching it for an hour. We couldn't quite finish up, and some people didn't really get their questions answered. So I thought this would be a nice opportunity to get people, to get some questions answered.
That works for me. Sure.
Anyone missed out. I think one of the main ones that we didn't get to reach last time was really the Darkwing Duck characters themselves. Like some people were asking, like, how do you get like certain villains like Quackerjack, and Bushroot and the Liquidator, and then there was also a question about Morgana, like how'd you guys came up with Morgana, and like how is she Darkwing's love interest? So
I mean, there's no one single process for coming up with a villain. As I covered last time, a lot of my inspiration came from the Silver Age, but also certainly into the Marvel Age and all that. And I was lucky enough to collect like all the early Marvel comics. And a lot of that stuck with me. So when you look at comic companies and characters, it's not like you see a lot of unique characters. It's like how many companies have put forth a guy who runs fast, and not just talking to Flash and Quicksilver. There's the Wizard and the original Flash and Johnny Quick, and that goes on. Every company had somebody who ran fast, and eventually just about, and certainly they all flew, but some had wings. And so when it came to our villains, there's always those archetypes, not just in villains, but also heroes. You could say, oh, that hero controls insects. What if that was a villain, kind of thing? Sometimes it was pitched by writers. I always had everything came through me. So if someone came close to something that sparked something in me, we'd go back and forth on it. But like Morgana, I forgot whether, I know I did an early design of her, and but I forget whether Dev Ross, who wrote the first script, I don't know whether she pitched Morgana, but she certainly had a huge part in creating her personality since she did the first script. And of course, that's with my input too. And other story editors for that matter, who, she changed slightly going through the various hands. So Dev had a huge part in making her a stronger female villain, which I've said before, Amanda Dybert in the Darkwing Duck series really did a great job in capturing. Len Yulee did the first Megavolt script. I think Megavolt was something, an electrical villain is something we talked about. I forget whether, I'm trying to think of, well, you're talking 30 years or whatever. I don't know whether I did the first sketch of Megavolt, or at least, I know I didn't with the face. I'm just talking about the battery on his back. But in general, that's probably a Kenny Tompkins design. And when we had a villain like that, it was instantly discussed with all the story editors. So Len did the first script, which was called Duck Blind, where Darkwing was blinded by this huge light bulb that Megavolt created. But at the same time, other people would be working on scripts too. And as soon as Dan Castellaneta did the voice, it was like, oh, okay, now we're really getting into it. And I think Doug Langdale was specifically a writer who really got into the wackiness of that character and just the off-kilter comments and motivations that he would have. Quackerjack was definitely just, and I don't want to sound like I'm taking credit for everything if I didn't. I think the name came from me, but the idea of a Joker-esque villain was certainly out there as just what's our take on a Batman villain. But the whole toy maker aspect of him, that probably, I could easily believe that just came out of the script, that whoever played with the character did that. And Liquidator, I forget where he came from originally, but that is a character, again, I've said before that I was not good at writing. I didn't, most of the scripts came through me, or everything went through me as far as giving notes and all that. And then a lot of them I would do a pass on, sometimes heavy, sometimes I would split a script with somebody, or sometimes light. But the editors had a lot more control on Darkwing than, say, Rescue Rangers, which really heavily were rewritten by me and other story editors. Anyway, so everything was different. But Liquidator, what fans love about him was just something I was not great at. I think it was Dwayne Capizzi was the story editor who really, he and his writer Steve Roberts really got into the slogan as conversation. They did a masterful job of. So it's random. Same with heroes, having guest heroes. It's, how many comic companies have a fish character, or as in Aquaman, Submariner, all of that. So that's what we played with. Yeah, pretty much. And that was, that's the most fun of my career was the Village, was, having, it's different now. But back then your entire crew was, except for some freelance writers, some freelance storyboard artists, everybody else was in the same building, usually the same floor and the same, the offices were as close as possible. And just having that ability to talk back and forth, call a quick meeting, seeing what somebody's drawing on their desk, being able to talk to someone directly as opposed to going through several people, a telephone game. It was a really creative team, both artists and writers. So, that's the biggest positive I had in my career.
That's so cool. So someone named Toons is watching and they say, love your work, Mr. Stones.
Thank you very much, Toons.
Can I show it off? Yay.
Yeah. Not to be confused with Toons is the cat from SNL fame.
For anyone who's watching, guys, if you want to leave a comment just to say hi to chat or ask a question, please feel free. We want to. This is why we're on today. We want to talk to you guys.
If I don't know the answer, I'll make up something. It's okay. It's modern social media. I can lie. Yeah.
But you said someone sent a question to you. They said, how long did it take to create an episode from beginning to end?
I'm very fuzzy on this. There's 9 months, I believe, was the overseas time. I can be wrong. And it varied from studio to studio, because to turn out 65 episodes in the first season, actually more, an additional 13 went to ABC. We used several different studios. Some drew him better than others. Some were tighter animators. Some, we tried out one studio that went way too far as closer Ren and Stimpy than what we had in mind. So not only would it be overseas, but then you would call retakes, which is literally, as long as, if you ask the studio to do something and they did it and it came out bad, we would have to pay for that. So sometimes you weren't allowed to, and you just had to deal with it or edit around it. If they messed up, like they got too far off model, or there were color mistakes, especially with Darkwing and Negaduck.
Mhm.
It was very easy looking at a storyboard and mixing up the colors, who was who. Um, then they would have to do that as part of their, contract. So that I think that was about 9 months. As far as from premise to script, since we didn't have to go through a lot of on the syndicated shows, didn't have to go through a lot of um, detailed notes. I mean, we got notes on every step from somebody. Well, in this case, Greg Wiseman within the department, but it wasn't like we had to go to a network and let them get back to us after X amount of time. But generally, once you had a premise, those would be approved pretty quickly, usually just by me. And, on Darkwing, I think it was, I had the ultimate say. I don't think even Greg, it was a different atmosphere in those shows. It wasn't like a veto power,
Mhm.
later shows that turned into that. Um, and then we would do, I think, give the writer a week to do an outline. Um, and generally, premises were written up in, we didn't submit a premise until we kind of had the three acts in our head. Like, okay, there's going to be these kind of set pieces, and it's going to end with this way. Uh, and that's even before. So that was more mental gymnastics you did before even putting out a premise. Now I've seen, well, again, I'm out of touch, but I know when I was back in touch, you know, people were demanding premises that basically had the structure lined out, which I thought was unfair because nobody gets paid for premises. If you're on staff,
Mhm.
that's one thing, but a freelancer just pitches a premise. We would buy a premise for like $250 back then if we accepted a premise without using the writer, but that was very rare. Um, anyway, we'd say to outline where those are now the major beats, all there, so you really know where the story is. We'd give them uh, a week, then the editor would get a week, and then the script would get, and of course that would have notes and all that. So the rewrite and the notes would be given, back to the writer. They'd have 2 weeks to do a script, I think a week to do a rewrite, and generally, because of our schedule, we didn't have the writer do the polish. The editor just did the polish. Um, so whatever that adds up to. So at a month, I don't know, like 10, 11 months from start to finish. Now that was, you realize that, especially with everybody in that, is basically overlapping. So the editor is handling several stories. It's not like, oh, I gave notes on that and I'm going to kick back for a week until the writer comes in with his next part. No, he's working on other premises and finish scripts and all of that.
Mhm.
So it's all overlapping. And I believe we had at the highest, I think we had, I want to say 5 story editors. And some of the writers, at least one of the writers, moved up. Tom Minton came from Warner Brothers, came on. I don't think at the very beginning, but early on enough. But he was one of the main story editors, and that's kind of how we did it. Again, the most fun part back then was we had, since it wasn't for a network, and since our boss was busy running the business, and Greg Wiseman was totally on board, having been a comic book editor himself and knowing all our references. It was pretty smooth going. That if we had a wacky idea, we could pretty much move forward with it. Especially on some of my favorite shows, which are the weirder shows, where like you're doing a parody of Twin Peaks, which is
Mhm.
gonna get weird, or here's a show where the story is constantly going to change depending on who's writing the comic book script on the screen. Um, that's just so hard to make somebody understand and enough to pitch it. It's like, um, you know, when SpongeBob started out and was so popular, every studio was saying, we're looking for our SpongeBob. And every editor, writer, producer knew, if at least in other studios, would say, if we pitched that show to you, you would never have seen the light of day. You know, it was just like you would have given them notes out of that. Because especially in the early years, the default Disney thing was kind of doing mini features. That was the Disney tradition, you know, and it took a while to have shows that came out of that or broke out of that box, you know. So it was just, it's that same sort of thing. We were lucky enough that we didn't get that constant oversight. So if we had a wilder, crazier idea, it didn't have to go through a lot of hands where you have to understand something and do extra sketches to make them understand, you know. It's like nobody signed off on character designs other than me. We didn't have to show that to anybody. So, you know, that's how it went. That was, again, the looseness of that was what made the show so much fun.
Did you get to see like each episode through every process, or mainly just like the writing and conception? Like, did you get to see like the voice actors do their work, the editors do their work?
Oh yeah, somewhere online I've posted it, and I think people have copied it here and there. I don't know if it's on YouTube or not, but I posted a very rare time where I took a video camera into the rehearsal for a show. The show was a 2-part episode, Just Us Ducks. So we had all these hero characters who had been throughout the series, all these villain characters, all the regulars, and it doesn't happen anymore. Actors are generally recorded either from their homes or one at a time. But back then, we would try to get as many actors in the studio at once. Generally, that's how the business, you know, was set up, that, you know, Tuesdays you're recording Darkwing Duck in the afternoons or in the morning at 10, whatever it is. And then we would go through rehearsal live, and they could work off each other. And
is your package here?
I think I have my packages here. I'll be right back.
It's all good.
Something was left on the porch. So exciting. Oh. Excuse me. Hi, good. This is for you. There you go.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, that was the part I didn't have to sign for. And this is, okay, that's part of it. And hey, I will say this to everybody as we go through a heat wave. If you can afford it, tip your delivery drivers. So I think you heard part of that. Because they're out there in the heat. You can't tip the post office, but everybody else, more than happy. So anyway, there may be another one because I'm actually supposed to sign for it. She put that behind a potted plant. So
Okay.
Where was I? What brilliant thing was I espousing?
You were talking about when you had as many people in the recording booth as you had.
Oh yeah. So actually, so they could actually play off each other, and those rehearsals were done at high speed by our voice director at Jeannie McSwain. Anyway, I taped the rehearsal for those episodes. Very crummy quality. It was, you know, there's not a lot of bright lights in that room. But if you search it, if I find it again, I'll post it more recently again so people can see it.
To look for it later
today.
Yeah,
because it's really entertaining, because you see classic voice actors, you know, doing it, all being their younger selves. So, and people who are really famous for, you know, they might have had a minor role in our show, but you say, oh wait, that was the lead character in this show or that show. So well worth looking out. So I'll try reposting it, like I say, on my Facebook page. And where else can I post it? It's too long. Whatever. That'll be somewhere to search out.
Okay. Yeah. But you essentially got, but like I guess you essentially got to be through. You got to see the whole process.
Oh yeah, Yeah, so all the beginning stuff, and again, because I'm an artist too. In fact, I recently found this is from Buzz Lightyear Star Command, the show that is still not on Disney Plus, but this
Come
is
on,
a
Disney.
character. Let's see if we can see that. Can you see the images? Yeah, there it goes.
Oh my goodness!
This is Nosferatu 2. Yeah. So that was my sketch, and that's the closest I've ever designed something where they've really took it to the extent that I even did the color model of that because I had specific ideas. And so it is the, again, sorry about the glare.
That is so cool.
I mean, they really came close. Obviously, the designer, this would have been Greg Guler, put more detail and stuff like that, but the basic shapes. And
how
when
surreal is that? Like, just
oh, it's fantastic. That's why this one's never been open. I'm generally a proponent of. I'm not a collector of toys in boxes. It's like when we got these, I opened them, you know, just to play with them or whatever. Or actually, during Darkwing's time, my kids played with them. So we a lot are a little worse for wear. But that's when I designed that character, I actually thought, well, they'll never make a toy out of this one because he ends in a point and they won't be able to stand him up. And they put him out, did a little clear plastic stand for him and was like, hey, what do I know? Anyway, that was, you know, I would do little sketches often, but not for every character. Again, in Darkwing, one of my directors, Toby Shelton, you know, I originally knew at feature animation, and he was just, and he eventually went back to feature and then went to DreamWorks and then came back to Disney. I don't know. He did the main cast of Darkwing Goslin, Launchpad, the Muddlefoots. I think he did the Muddlefoots. Not sure. Anyway, and then the second story, character designer was Kenny Tompkins, who did all these. Never going to get the pointing thing down. Kenny did all these sculptures of the Darkwing gang that were just, those aren't toys. That's, you know, for the crew was there. But Kenny had a friend who could make molds and do resin castings. And I got one of the few complete sets. But he did fantastic on that. Anyway, so yeah, I got to be part of that. The storyboards then came through, and I would do notes on those, and just which included sketches like that. Now, my co-producer is Alan Zaslov, but Alan was actually one of the directors too, and he was pretty much directing his unit full time. So generally, and again, once you're working at a certain level and you know your artists and you know what to look for or what might be missed, you know. I mean, sometimes it was frustrating when something was changed in the board and then it goes to the timing director who comes in a huff saying, that can't work like that. You can't make this cut. And it's like I say, yes, this cut doesn't work. It's like, you're supposed to be in close on this. And he goes, oh, well, that'll work. I said, yeah, that's why we wrote it that way in the script. So, and it's not like I wanted storyboard people to, be slaves to the script. It's like, no, because we wrote detailed scripts, there was generally a description for every shot. That doesn't mean every shot that's in the final show. But if a storyboard artist was just a machine, a serviceable show would come out from just the detail, certainly on the scripts that I did, because that's how I was trained. But you want to have that basis, and then the story artist has the leeway to say, oh, I've got a better gag, or I've got this I can do, and all that. But they do have to understand the script that's going on, so that if you hit something that, quote, doesn't work, it's to have to back up. Another one that stuck with me was in one where, again, I'm not one for episodes unless they've been discussed with fans. Darkwing Doubloon, I'm going to guess, is the name of the show. Anyway, it was Darkwing being a pirate, or a pirate fantasy where the villains were pirates too. And they had created a much more, I think Darkwing bursts out of the doors of the captain's cabin on the ship. And they came up with a much more dramatic, Errol Flynn kind of, or Douglas Fairbanks appearing at the top of the mast and swinging down and all of that. But it's like it changed all the staging. So then the next beat couldn't happen that way. Well, that was a case where the storyboard came in and it's like, no, this is great. What can we do to make this work and shuffle around? Or do we need that line? Can we, so it wasn't like the script was king. It was, oh, what's the most entertainment? Or sometimes it's just, we are too close to deadline to have anybody redo all this work, and it's decent work. How do we make this move forward? But ideally, you're always trying to improve things, the famous plussing everything that comes through your hands. But it's, again, we were really pressed for time,
Right,
but let me think. I'm going through other steps. Cleanup, we didn't really storyboard cleanup in a few cases. If there was another step, I didn't have to see those, because basically when I'm going through, I'm saying story and entertainment. And I really like in DuckTales, the new 2017 DuckTales, they really had some storyboard guys who just knew how to make, especially the adventurous shots, more adventurous, more dramatic, where a lot of Darkwing is played like an old short subject, like a Warner Brothers cartoon, where sometimes the gags play best when it's just flat, going right to left or left to right. Certainly we did dramatic shots, but, had I thought of it at the time, I would have pushed for more of that, dramatic thing. Again, hindsight teaches you a lot. But when we got great episodes, I should have had some meetings where I'm just complimenting people by showing it to the whole team at the same time to say, more of this. Look how good this is. Or even copy storyboard, pages and pinning them up somewhere or something. But who knows? Maybe it would have hurt feelings. Again, that strive to say, this doesn't take any more effort, just takes a little more thinking before you just go with the first thing you think of.
The questions are coming in. Are you ready?
All right, I'm ready.
But I put this one up because it kind of came in line with what you said. That, like, did you like seeing Darkwing in the newest DuckTales? And
yeah, I thought it was great. I thought, again, when Frank Aragonis, I think I've said this before, was Darkwing Duck for Halloween 3 years in a row. He did a book report on a Darkwing Duck episode. He's never told me what grade he got on that or if it was accepted. They really knew, as fans, they knew the show, both of DuckTales, and a lot of the crew were Darkwing fans too. So they knew him, but they approached the reboot in some ways much like a live action reboot. And they weren't the first ones to do that. And that means, let's start with Scrooge McDuck. We're not going to have someone sound like Scrooge McDuck. I mean, there are tons of people who can do that. A lot of times people who want to be voice actors try to prove it by imitating characters that an actor is already doing. It's like, we got that guy. We don't need you to do that guy. It's coming up with new stuff. Anyway, they approach it more like live action. It's like, okay, who embodies this character? And they came up with David Tennant, who's, naturally has the accent and obviously a great actor and sense of humor and all that. So when they went to Darkwing, they're saying, we're rebooting this. We're not just going to do the same story scene by scene. What's the point? It was like, how do we introduce him? And it threw fans, because having Jim Cummings do the character Jim Starling who did the old show, they
Mhm.
basically said Darkwing Duck the hero was inspired by this old TV show. And that was the premise. It's not like they didn't have to come up with a
Mhm.
origin of Darkwing because Drake Mallard was inspired by the old TV show. The old TV show, we never talk about the origin of that guy. That was writers sitting in a writer's room. They came up with this show that, became a huge hit with kids. But having Jim Cummings do that voice, I think really confused fans. They said, that's Darkwing, that's Darkwing. And then they kind of resisted, like, who's this other guy? Well, the other guy is Drake Mallard. That's the guy,
Mhm.
And I just thought, again, accepting they were going to do something different, I thought having spoilers, if you haven't seen the final episodes, to have Jim Starling, the actor who played the old Darkwing, go a little crazy and finally snap and become evil, and the chemicals or whatever in the sewer that he fell into drip away, and instead of wearing purple, he's wearing yellow, and it's like he's the new Negaduck.
Which I thought
It
was
was great.
brilliant.
Yeah, I just thought that was so classic, so good. And they had super plans taking, obviously they wanted to do a Darkwing show afterwards. And they had even how that show could mutate. And one of the possibilities was after a while, you get to the point where Negaduck moves into Darkwing's house. So there's basically two dads raising Gosalyn, or at least affecting Gosalyn. So that would be obviously a whole different show, or would have just been a little mini idea within a series. But they were, again, when you're starting out, you want to entertain all those ideas. So I love seeing Darkwing there. I just love that there was that much. The same with Dynamite's comics again, and Joe Brooks and books and Boom before them. To see Darkwing resurrected as a comic book character, has the same kind of thrill. But to see it in animation, I hope to see it again in animation.
Me too.
That's just super exciting. As long as they're keeping, as long as it's recognizable that you say, oh, I get it. Oh, they changed that and they changed that. But overall, I felt the Darkwing 2017 version was, great.
You brought up Gosalyn, and I thought Toons had a good question here. Like, having Darkwing be a single adoptive dad, did that decision happen organically, or was that part of the initial pitch?
It must have been an initial pitch, because basically I didn't want to kill Darkwing's parents. I didn't want to kill, I didn't want to deal certain things. So I didn't want Gosalyn to be his daughter, because that means, where's mom? What happened to mom? How was mom killed, or died or whatever? It's just, for another series, that would have been fine. Obviously, we were doing something different with this series, which was much less serious. We ended up being able to carry off very emotional moments, once those characters had really become bonded. And that's largely through the talents of Jim Cummings and Chrissy Cavanaugh. But it was just simply, we need her removed from Darkwing. We didn't want Uncle Darkwing, in the classic Disney thing. Although in some early merchandising, people just assumed it was Uncle and wrote about him that way. So it was, okay, this makes sense that she's going to be adopted. So, that's basically, it wasn't forward thinking or trying to do a social commentary or anything. It was just like, why not? I didn't see anything. It didn't seem weird to me at all, which I guess is a good thing. And that's how we portrayed it. The only thing I will say in hindsight, we did like zero research into how do kids get adopted these days. And I came to Disney during the Rescuers, and it's like, yes, Penny was in an orphanage and all the other kids were being adopted, and she wasn't. Madame Medusa came and adopted Penny. The orphanage system was gone, I think, like in the, I want to say the 20s, maybe before, and the foster system came into place, which is a whole different thing. Could still have worked, but you know, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, that might have been worth a Google search or two. Not that Google existed back then, but you know, maybe ask around. So
That's still really, really interesting. Another one came in. What character design is your favorite? Either one you've designed or one somebody else did.
I don't know. To me, favorites is like, I don't know. I think it would be pretty sad if you had all these characters and there was, well, that one I liked. You know, it's like, yeah, the others are just crap. No, I think the main cast, all of them by Toby Shelton, are fantastic. I really liked his redesign of Launchpad. You know, where to me, I look at the old Launchpad at the model sheets from the original DuckTales, and he's kind of the skinny guy and all that. Mm-hmm. It's like I have certainly trouble seeing our guy, even though, you know, the voices, Terry did the voice on both. So I really just enjoyed that. All
of them. Easy answer.
5 or stuff like that. I mean, generally everyone looks really good. So, you know, there are some that I don't think they're bad designs. It was like, the concept didn't allow for as much fun or something. On the other hand, Splatter Phoenix is a character. Now there's a character that was pitched that is hardly any of me, I'm going to say. It was mostly Carter Crocker, and I think he was working for Dwayne Capizzi, or had Carter become a story editor, whatever, writing her dialogue and her visual look, where, you know, it's very simple but comes off great, especially by the Australian animated episodes. And I wish we had made more of her. I've said in the past, I don't feel in alternate universe, it's not like I dislike what was there, but instead of having Negaduck be in charge of the Fearsome Five made for a funny dynamic, but it really did put Negaduck in the front, and those guys were, you know, basically there for action bits. If we had taken out Negaduck and thrown in Splatter Phoenix, I think the interpersonal villain play would have been really exciting, really funny anyway. But really, that's one of those things where, yeah, we'd have no time to play that out because we got to move the story along or whatever. So who knows? But that's something that's entertained just because she was a great female villain. So anyway, that's it for picking favorites. I got none. I love the ones I love a lot, and there's lots of them. So
I'm going through my head. I want to make sure I don't like do any repeats because I'm like, I think I asked all the big ones in the first interview. Mm-hmm. Although K-pop just sent in a great question. Do you have any characters you want to see in a crossover event?
It depends on the event and who they're crossing over with. I mean, I talked before about Nick proposing a Darkwing Duck Gargoyles crossover, which in a multiverse kind of way, I think would be hilarious. And as I've said before, Greg Wiseman.
Thumbs up if you want that.
Yeah. Greg Wiseman knows Darkwing inside out, you know, that especially in comics, letting Greg work with Roger Langridge, you know, and or Jeff Parker, you know, having a group working on a multi-issue limited series, you know, but a single issue would be great. But Greg would definitely have to head up how the gargoyles are treated in that. Mm-hmm. Other than that, crossovers, it's more like somebody pitches something and you go, is there any reason not to do this? I mean, what's the plus? I mean, a Gargoyle's Darkwing, nobody would expect. So you'd get the, what? You get a lot of curiosity saying, okay, I got to buy that. You know, I think that would sell a lot of copies. If it's something like Darkwing and DuckTales, you go, well, yeah, that makes sense, but it doesn't make you go, wow. So, you know, it's how you do it. The old Disney, and I'm not even familiar with it. Other people quoted to me. That's why I know that it existed. In the little Disney Digest, which was called the Disney Afternoon, I think, for a while, or Disney Adventures, or both, actually. They did a multi-part story where it goes through all the different shows, but there wasn't a lot of, as I understand it, teaming up. To me, you want more than a gimmick. You don't want one person who's chasing through and visiting each of the Disney Afternoon shows. You want something where, no, I want to see Goslin teaming up with Goliath. It's like those two are stuck together. That alone, and then you could have little bits where everybody is trying to find them or rescue them or something else, and there's dangers they're fighting. But, you know, something like that at the center makes for a certain amount of fun. So any crossovers is more not that, oh, you know, I've always wanted to see a crossover. No, it's what you come up with. And I'm really supportive of the idea of and Jeff Parker did a bunch of them, you know, writers coming up with new villains and, you know, making the most of them and really giving them a unique voice where you ideally at the end of a script, you go, I want to see that animated. It's like, oh, I wish that was an episode. That's what I'd love to see people, you know, swing for the fences.
Like, I was lucky enough to talk to Amanda again and to talk with Jeff and Roger. And like, so thank you from all of them. Cause I said like, cause I told them like how you were really impressed with all their work. And they all said, thank you very much.
Well, you guys are welcome.
Tunes has another question. Did you have any say in the Rescue Rangers theme song? I think it's one of the best ever for a cartoon.
That was largely, I mean, we had fewer, again, Disney cheapness, because the payoff for a composer and lyricist for a daily cartoon show is huge. I mean, I can't tell you what it is, but I know, get that, okay, I can buy a house now or whatever. Because of that, they could just put out the call and say, these are people we're interested in working with. Here's a description of the show and the characters, whatever, what you got. There were fewer submitted for Darkwing. Rescue Rangers, I used to have a tape of, you know, all the submissions. But it was Jeffrey Katzenberg who held out for the Chippendale because he wanted that same kind of feeling from the DuckTales hook of woohoo. Whereas the one I liked was only because again, sometimes I get too much in my head instead of backing up and saying, oh yeah, we're supposed to get people to watch the show. Was Rescue Rangers to the Rescue. And the whole point was it sounded like this big dramatic marching, you know, theme. And the idea is that there's goofy little animals about 3 inches tall, you know, doing this show. Actually wouldn't have made for necessarily a great theme song, you know, show opener. However, I like the music so much, we actually bought the rights to the music, because when the Rescue Rangers go into action and you hear the musical dun 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 dun, dun is that theme song. I just said, no, I want that same kind of gag that attracted me to it, to, you know, play the gag of being very, very dramatic when they go out. But Jeffrey is the one who held out for the stutter.
Swiping in the Void. I didn't know this. I don't remember if we talked about this
either.
last time.
This is new. This is news to me.
Yes.
Somebody forwarded the leak to me, and I can at least see if it's one that I've heard about.
First I gotta look up your video. First I gotta look up your video. Now I gotta look up this pitch because I'm like, this is news to me.
Recently leaked. Were you involved in the creative process? No. If not, have you seen the pitch? No. And what's your opinion on it? Haven't seen it. I was paid to be a consultant at the beginning of the process, and I saw, and this was more than a year ago now, I saw some written material that wasn't even the most recent script of I guess it was going to be a 6 or maybe 5 episode miniseries, or maybe more actually. I'm stuck in syndication terms. So I saw the first script of that and an overview of the story, and I gave notes on that. That I thought was, I gave notes on several levels. The most big one, I pointed out that you're creating this character and we already have that character here. I know what you're trying to get. You're asking the audience to forget this major thing to accept that. But then there'd be a simpler thing of, just like animation notes, of this script is way too long, because the short story is, George Lucas once said the most expensive line in a script is "they fight." 2 words that can last 10, 15 minutes in a movie. Well, sneaking into a factory or something like that, they didn't give any time for that. They were going by page count, saying, well, that's not a long script. Well, let your director look at this and give notes. So I saw that way back when. And then later on, they were pitching their version of the show to an executive, and I was at the rehearsal for that pitch. And that was the first time I saw visuals, that they had redesigned the characters a lot. And some characters weren't in it. Anyway, that was the last. So I gave notes. Again, I try to accept what they're doing and try to give positivity toward anything I like, because I know at that late stage, it's like, there's no point in me saying, this is all wrong, this is crazy, what are you doing, and going out. That's just, they're still going to pitch to the executive what they have Tuesday, or coming up. That was the last I heard. And I think I told the story before, but Bob Schooley of Schooley and McCorkle fame, who did Kim Possible and many other things, they called, along with Buzz Lightyear, Star Command, and Hercules with me, and Bob called up and said, hey, we just heard that the showrunner left because he wasn't taking notes, and they disbanded the writer's room on Darkwing Duck. And my response was, they had a writer's room? So I don't even know if that group was the same group I saw originally.
Oh.
So the last thing I heard was basically, they're going in a new direction. So I'm fascinated to see this leak.
So everything's up in the air right now with the future.
As far as I know, I mean, it'd be interesting if in this leak, if there's anything that, if I look at and say, oh no, that's just the thing I saw way back when. Mm-hmm. What I've said before is I loved what those guys did with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, with Mutant Mayhem, and I'm sure there'll be more footage of the new 2D animated show at Comic-Con coming at San Diego coming up. Also those turtles, where they made them actual teenagers. I just thought it was brilliant. I thought it was brilliant visually. I love the story. Really love how they did the personalities. And I was an adult when Turtles came out. So it wasn't like I'm carrying all this baggage from my childhood. It's like, no, this is awesome and really entertaining, and did very well. I just hope those same guys, the decision makers at Point Grey Pictures, which is Seth's company, he and his partners sprinkle the same magic on Darkwing Duck, so that, man, if we got something that good, be over the moon. So all my comments about me not seeing the leak, but man, I'm writing a note on that too.
I hope they keep you in the loop somehow.
Yeah.
I really hope.
Well, I mean, when I look at stuff like that, it's basically, depending on how far along, major notes. I think I'd be more blunt this time around to just say, okay, I'm just pointing out this stuff to you. But if they've captured the essence, even if they've changed all the details, my own preferences, the Darkwing Duck situation, meaning literally as in sitcom situation, is not hard to pick up on the fly. I mean, if basically you start off with Darkwing chasing villains and then have, or villains are getting away and this weird duck plane comes out and you see Launchpad in it, and then the hatch opens up in the bottom and Darkwing on the Ratcatcher motorcycle comes out and bounces on the street and captures these guys, and then gets into trouble, and suddenly this little girl comes out of nowhere, jumping off a roof and landing on a villain. If you don't know anything about Darkwing, you'd be intrigued. You go, whoa! And then afterwards, it was like, what were you doing out there? You were supposed to stay at home. You always say that. Okay, I get the dynamic back at the base without spelling it out, just by what sounds like you could be watching episode 26. It would have to be the same conversation. That's enough to get through. So my feeling would be, don't bother with an origin. Let's just make the comedy funnier and make the adventure bigger. And again, the Turtles thing that they did, because previous to that, the only reason, or enough of a reason you needed to do another Turtles thing, was they sell a lot, I will say, of toys. So you say, hey, we're going to do this again, of course, and then at a certain point, it was like, all these moviegoers loved it when they were kids. They're going to love to see this live action version, And look, all these toys. This version of Turtles was the one that went back to the roots and says they're always treated as superheroes. And yes, they eat pizza, but they weren't really treated as teenagers, like young teenagers. And it was so brilliant, yet so simple. And it's at the essence of that show. I don't know that Darkwing has anything internal like that. On the other hand, if they did it in CG, we've never seen a CG Darkwing before. That might be enough to see it. If it's just funnier and more adventurous, to me, you cut a great trailer, and that's plenty you don't really have to redo the concept to get a show moving and be fun. But yeah, I would love to see it.
DJ Fizzy asked, did you like Bonkers?
I didn't see a lot of Bonkers. I felt bad because Bonkers had such a rough. First of all, Bonkers in concept was Roger Rabbit, so a lot of us were kind of in our heads about it, saying, "But it's all animated." And really, since then, I've come to realize, you set a premise for a show, and it's just, here's a human world that has tunes in it. The fact that they're drawn human world doesn't make a difference. But the first half of the show, they were coming back, and I've talked how good Australia was. Darkwing had like 7, 8 Australian episodes because it was such a tiny studio at the time. It expanded, so now they could do like 22 episodes. So pretty much half a series could have this fantastic animation on it. Bonkers and Goof Troop were being produced at the same time, and they chose, because of Goofy is Goofy, put the Australian team on Goofy first, and then they'll do the back half of Bonkers. Well, the difference is Bonkers came in a show reliant on animation in many ways from these very weak studios. And Goofy came back, who's, not as reliant on animation in that, yes, it helps, but DuckTales, you could argue, is as reliant on animation, but it did it without it. Anyway, the comparison came back, and it's like, oh my God, Bonkers is in trouble. And suddenly scripts that were thought to be, this is an A+ script. Literally, there was a script that was given an A+ by one of the executives. And then that script was held out as one of the worst things that has come out of this place by a different executive, because their brain had switched around. And anyway, that's me being way on the outside. And it's just like suddenly that team was trashed. The Goof Troop, many of the Goof Troop team went onto Bonkers, and so did the Australian studio, because they had finished their 22. So suddenly, you know, Bonkers got a new lease on life that way. And they changed lead characters and all that. So you ended up with kind of a mishmash of different characters and all that. But I literally have not seen that many. I'm sure I've seen at least 2 all the way through 20 years ago. But that was, to me, Bonkers is more about the behind the scenes drama, as I saw it. And as I've said about my own shows, where people have, oh, Darkwing is based on Masked Mallard and Double O Duck. It's like, well, that's kind of true, not true of the Masked Mallard at all, but yes. So again, I'm on the outside. Even people in the studio who aren't in that heart of the drama don't know what's going on. They assume they know what's going on. So everything I've said, it's suspicious, or take it with a grain of salt. Because I heard people complaining and whining, other people who had written on the show saying, oh, we were trash because of such and such. But again, I haven't watched as a viewer a lot of Bonkers.
That's okay though.
Yeah.
I guess it's already almost, that hour flew by fast.
We don't have to do part 3. Are there any other questions? I'll try to be shorter.
I like letting people go. I like letting people go because I love hearing every detail. I love hearing all the details. But I mean, like I said, my questions pretty much got answered in part 1. So anyone who hasn't watched part 1, go watch part 1. Then you can rewatch this part. Like I'll give people an extra minute to get something last minute in. Otherwise, I think.
Well, hopefully they saw part 1, and this is just icing on the cake, as they say.
Icing on the cake. I think it is.
Yeah. And if you're going to San Diego Comic-Con, obviously you are a wealthy person. No. Then Dynamite is having a panel that I'll be on Sunday. Check your local listings to see when it is, because a lot of times that stuff gets shuffled at the last minute. And I'll be on with a bunch of the other Dynamite creators.
We got 2 questions came up. One's more for us, and then one's more for you. Does Dynamite Comics do comic submissions? I believe you send it. I know on our main website there's a specific email that you go to for the submission. So I would say double check our website and look up submissions, because I think that's where you submit comics. And then DJ Fizzy has one more. Well, we kind of really went in what goes into making a cartoon, but I guess DJ means how. How do you get the studio to say yes to your idea and invest in it?
I have to say this, and people say, "Oh, come on, tell me." And it's like, I am so out of touch with the way things work now. I know I was shocked at. I visited Scully and McCorkle at DreamWorks when DreamWorks was first starting up their television series, and they were doing, I forgot the title, but it was one of the Madagascar shows. So might have been Penguins of Madagascar, unless they had one ahead of that. Whatever. I was shocked that they were not, when you're starting a show, you're kind of mentally casting it with writers. You're saying, okay, I'm going to get so and so
Mhm.
and so and so is great for this, and they weren't allowed to do that. They had to, and they said even at the time, because they had been up and running a bit, they said, well, it's worked out. They're talented people, but they couldn't just pick out a writer to use. They had to go from an approved writers list that the story
Mhm.
department at DreamWorks had. I don't know how they found them. Uh, and they said, look, try these guys. And if they don't, and we're talking about staff positions, try these guys. If they don't work for you, we'll bring in somebody else. And it kind of worked because they were dealing with talented people. And arguably, working with new people gave Mark and Bob new ideas, fresh ways of approaching things. So that was however long ago, the Penguin show was. Um, that was like such a insane idea
Mhm.
to me, because I used to have people who I just had a conversation. I got new writers coming in who just pitched me an entertaining premise, or they pitched several premises that showed they could write, even though, or they were already kind of a version of that idea was already in development, that I encouraged to pitch again. And finally, some of those guys, ended up writing for us. And then some of those actually ended up on staff. I had complete leeway with that sort of stuff. So now I have no idea of how things are working. And then the pandemic hit. Studios broke up. Only now is my sense that they are starting to bring people back in-house to work. And the animation industry has kind of imploded, after there was a huge expansion for all the streaming shows that happened,
Mhm.
especially with Netflix, in the last couple of years. It's like, okay, we don't have that money anymore. And suddenly people who've worked on several shows are looking for jobs. Uh, and they did the idea that everybody was working at home when they did full length feature films and they turned them out is just amazing to me.
Mhm.
So, how the process works in animation and pitching generally, um, if you're trying to get in the animation industry and your first idea is, how do I pitch my show? Like, no, you don't. You have to kind of soak up what the industry is like. If you have a IP, intellectual property that you've created in a comic medium or a book series or something like that, if they haven't approached you already, it's like, in theory, you could say, hey, what about doing, you might not have seen this. This is my web series and all that. It's
Mhm.
something they could look at a lot. If there's audience reaction, to that already, or reviews online or something, that might get your foot in the door. But generally, you have to realize how things work so that you don't look stupid because you are pitching ideas they've heard a million times and you
Mhm.
don't have a fresh take on it. You just think, oh, this is the way to do it,
Mhm.
and it's not enough to have a show that can tell a lot of stories. Um, you could create a show with like past characters. Like, let's say Dynamite we want to sell a Dynamite show
Mhm.
to Netflix or something, and we'll take this character that we have access to and this character and this character, and we're going to pitch something. And it's like, well, unless you're doing Hanna-Barbera's Wacky Racers from 50 years ago or whatever, um, it's like, we get why you want to do it, or we're going to use all the second string characters that we've created and put them together. It's like, no, how is this going to bring in an audience who's never
Mhm.
read your comic, who's never read your book series, who doesn't read, who just watches TikTok and plays video games? They're not seeing this primetime show on NBC that you're
Mhm.
making a parody of. This age group has never watched and doesn't care about. Why would we make an animated show about that? So you kind of have to be, one, if somehow you come up with an idea for a series and you're lucky enough to have them interested, you want to be involved in that. And it's like, at that point, they say, we love this idea. if you have enough clout, you think, to say you get this only if I have this position. If you can pull that off, then at the very least, they're going to assign somebody who's very experienced. And for all my animation experience in features and designing rides at Epcot Center and consulting at Disney TV, they put Alan Zaslav with me, or at least they certainly brought him onto DuckTales because he was an experienced person who'd worked not only in the classics, but in all these Hanna-Barbera shows. And they put him with me so I'd have a more experienced guy to help run the show. You know, I knew enough that, you know, I could let Alan go and direct a third of the series without having to run it. You know, in fact, I protected him from a lot of notes and things like that he found out later when he did his project with somebody else. Anyway, it's, you know, you need that experience. If you're lucky enough to get something sold, they have to fill it with writers and story editors and all of that. And you want to have the talent already that they say, oh, he can at least write scripts. Ideally, we want you to be the showrunner, that you really know this character and you understand how to write a script and animation and writing for animation and all of that. And you learn that by, there's scripts online that you can search for, or at cons sometimes you'll find them. And the trick is to find the most recent ones possible, or trade them with friends or something, or, you know, online, ask around. So there's no, and forgetting all of that, let's say it's back in the day, I pitched many series, and some that I say, I know this would be a good series, but nobody bought them at the time. So there's no guarantee. There's no formula to say this is how you pitch a series. But these days, I couldn't even tell you the steps you have to go through to pitch a series. Yeah, it's easier, I would still think, if you had an agent, but you're not going to get an agent unless you're writing stuff that makes the agent money. So before you pitch anything. Got anything else here?
I got one more. I'll show one more question. Okay. Vibing in the Void. Are there any stories and plot lines for Dark you would make if the series got another season?
Not really. I mean, that goes, again, going back 30 years plus, I think. There's nothing that stuck with me that's the one I got away, because we were constantly coming up with ideas. It wasn't like, oh, I have these few precious ideas and we'll do a bunch of filler material. It's like we were pitching from, especially the last things we did was the second season of ABC, where I had to go through the network schedule in terms of, I couldn't just come up with something and do it. I had to come up with premises with my editors and writers, and submit it to them, and they could go, yes, no, maybe, we really don't like this. This is a nice element in this one. It's like, so we're turning out, we might have an idea that, oh, that can be a lot of fun, and it gets submitted with at least 5 others. If they say no to that idea, it just doesn't get, it's like, it's out of your head, because your job is now to come up with 6 more ideas to pitch, because you've got 13 episodes to come up with to put into work. So nothing for us got to the stage where, oh, that's the one that got away. Now I have whole series like that. The Atlantis series that we did, yeah, I'd like to do that series, where a lot of people thought it was going to be the best thing we had done up to that time. But the best we got out of that is 3 of the episodes that were already in production. We were able to put together and call it Atlantis 2. But again, it's like, yeah, I wish I had this studio on it instead of that studio or whatever. But as far as episodes within a series, no. I mean, if you dragged up a bunch of undone premises that we pitched, you might read through them and say, oh, that would have been fun. But it's never gotten to the stage where you're really fleshing things out. I've noted this before. I was told and was astounded by the idea that Warner Brothers at the time, for Tiny Toons, was allowed to throw out like 3 scripts in a season, I was told. That just floored me, because the idea that we could write a script and it would get that far and then we choose not to do it because we think we have something better. No, if it got to script, that thing was going to get produced.
Oh, wow.
we would be pounding at it with hammers and fixing what we could. Then in board we'll say this is what should prop it up, and some of those are really improved, and others is just like, we got to get I got band-aids here. And it goes out the door. So that didn't happen. If we had that luxury, then maybe there would have been a script I go, oh yeah, that's the one. There's scripts that don't get aired. I mean, shows that don't get aired, like Hot Spells, which is a perfectly great episode that you're not going to see because maybe a half dozen, possibly less people, very Christian conservative people felt like, oh, you talked about the devil here. Gosling made a deal with the devil. Well, that was a literary conceit in literature that Faust would make a deal with the devil. The devil and Daniel Webster. That the idea that the devil could be a literary character or a TV character in this case was just, we can't touch that. And it's because that was pulled from ABC because of those few complaints. No one does research after that. They say, oh, that's got a black mark on it, so it didn't get put on DVD. It's not, I believe it's not in the Disney Plus screenings. And it's just silly. So it's like, yeah, I'd like to see that come back, but that's not an episode I didn't get to make. We actually made it. They just don't get to air it anymore.
I hear you.
Yeah.
But those were every question that came in today. Fantastic question. I think you also gave fantastic advice to anyone who really wants to work in animation. And I think that's where we're going to wrap up today. I don't think we need to do a part 3. I think this was excellent.
I think this is good. When they do the mini series on all the Justice Ducks characters that I keep pushing, I'll come back to talk about that. So
sounds
maybe
excellent.
a bit.
Sounds excellent.
All right. Well, thank you guys for all your questions. It was great.
Thank you, Tad, for doing this again. Thank you to you. Thank you to all the Darkwing Duck fans out there. To everyone who participated in the Kickstarter, thank you. And if you still want to do a late pledge, go do it right now. Thank you to everyone. And Tad, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Same to you.
Everyone else too. Everyone have a great rest of your day. All right.
See you guys. Bye.